This is Binod Shankar and you're listening to the Real Finance Mentor podcast from therealfinancementor.com. The Real Finance Mentor is your go-to resource for insight and inspiration on careers in finance, CFA and more. I would think, why this podcast? Well, my goal is to deliver insight and inspiration for your finance career by making it, one, relatable. This is not theoretical stuff. We zero in on the critical, practical issues. Number two, authentic. No bullshit, no sidestepping. The topics, guests, and questions are all from that perspective. And number three, take a chartered accountant and CFA charter holder, add 17 plus years as a corporate warrior, mix in 10 years of entrepreneurship, throw in a decade of full-time CFA training, add speaking, mentoring, cycling, and mountaineering, and that's me. Welcome to the Real Finance Mentor, or as I call it, RFM. Hi everyone, this is Binod Shankar here, the Real Finance Mentor, bringing you yet another installment of the RFM podcast that is focused on providing insight and inspiration for your finance careers. And my main ambition here is to look out for stories out there in the world of corporate finance or financial services and see what's so unique, what's inspirational, what's insightful out there. And then I try and grab that person and ask them to be on my show. And they almost always say yes. And one person who said yes is with me today. And I'm so glad that she's here. Let me introduce you to Pascale Palpi. Pascale is the head of FactSet Middle East and Africa. Now, for those who haven't heard of FactSet, which I must admit, Pascale should be highly unlikely they are investing. It's an American financial data and software company headquartered in Connecticut, in the US. The company provides integrated data and software, and its competitors include Bloomberg, Refinitiv, and S&P Global. Now, Pascale started her career in Paris, then moved back to her home country, which is Lebanon. 6 years later, she moved to Dubai, where she is now. She joined FactSet 5 years ago as the regional head for Middle East and Africa. In her spare time, she mentors young women, which is another reason why I wanted her to be on the show, and tries to help in any way she can other women to advance their careers. Recently, she became co-chair for the FactSet EMEA Women's BRG. She also likes art, painting, decorating, and anything creative, which is very nice to know for someone working in finance. And she is the mother of 2 boys, advocate of work-life balance, and recently got certified as a health coach to help herself and her family be healthier. Pascale holds a master's in finance and a bachelor's in economics. Pascale, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
Right, so Pascale, let's start from the beginning, right? You grew up in Lebanon. I have this theory that almost all successful, confident women who come from developing countries must have had a childhood where the girl child was treated fairly and encouragingly and not in the typical narrow-minded, conservative, patriarchal manner that is so prevalent in such societies. Tell me about how you were raised and how that impacted your personality. In brackets, by the way, I'm hoping that your case proves my theory.
Indeed, it does. My story confirms your theory. So I grew up in Lebanon. I grew up with 2 brothers, but I never felt that because I'm a girl or a woman, I had less chances of achieving my dreams or anything. On the contrary, like I was always encouraged to do more, especially by my eldest brother, who was, always encouraging me, giving me confidence when I was passing through, those teenage years where you kind of lack of self-confidence. And it's very motivating when someone believes in you that much. It gave me a drive and a grit and a strong will to actually move from being like an average student to a thriving student, a way for me to thank him. I think you guessed it. My brother is my role model and was and still is. But when young people ask me who's your role model, and I see them always looking at like corporate CEOs or famous people, I'm not saying it's bad, but I truly believe that the people who shape you are the people who are closest to you, your closest friends, your family. For me, it was my two brothers, my sister-in-law, my mother, who at 45 years old, for example, went back to finish her master's and re-entered the workforce. A story that shows that, it's never too late to start again.
It's interesting, why look outside for a role model like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or some other corporate titan when you already have a role model at home? My case, it is my mom,
Exactly.
who is also an ex-college professor. Yeah. Now, you almost became a doctor, is what you told me. Now, medicine's lost became economics gain, because you dropped out of medical college and completed a bachelor's degree in economics. What made you pick up economics, what they call the dismal science? Did you have a specific career in mind at that time?
Yeah, so I hope that this serves as an example that when you're 17, 18, it's okay not to have it all figured out. I know I didn't, or at least I thought I did, because I always wanted to be like kind of the fun doctor that, serves patients with empathy. But then during this first year, I felt so lost. I felt a sense of failure, and I was really lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I thought, okay, let me do architecture because I do like creative things, or economics, because at the time, the banking sector was really thriving in Lebanon. Unfortunately, it's no longer the case. So I felt that there is career, potential. But also, by coincidence, courses in economics started earlier than architecture. So I said, okay, let me give it a try. And I really liked the courses. I started to gain my confidence back. And I felt that, it's something I can build a career with. I might not be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer like every Arab mother wants. Probably the same in India. Yeah.
Now, after economics degree, Pascale, you went to France, right, for a 2 years master's degree in finance. That must have been a culture shock for you after growing up, like you said, in war-torn Lebanon. And even Lebanon post the 1990 Taif Peace Accord wasn't really that normal. What are the three things that you learned from that experience of shifting from Lebanon to a Western country and living there and working there and going to college there? What was the three things that has stuck with you all this while?
Yeah. So just another example here of how, as a woman, I always could do what I want. So I wanted to start after my bachelor to start working and helping the family. It's my brother again that said, encouraged me to go to France, and I applied to France, and I went to two very well-known universities in Paris. And I often look and wonder how my life would have been if I hadn't done that. On the personal level, I wouldn't have met my husband, but also on the professional level, it opened up so many doors for me that, I'm very grateful on that. On the culture shock, it's more like, as a Lebanese, when you go to a French school, you are exposed to French culture. So I wouldn't call it a shock of culture. It was more, once in Paris, I noticed that, what I lived during my youth, the war, even though I didn't have it as bad as others, wasn't normal. I remember crying the first time I went to Disney because I've never seen that, or taking the bus just to go by the monuments that I learned in books during school time. I do love Paris. So about the three things that stayed with me, I would say, first, if an experience is scary, do it, whether it turns out to be what you expect or not, or even better, you always learn through the process. For me, it was very scary to take the plane for the first time ever at 21 years old and live by myself in a foreign country, and I'm very grateful that I did that. Second, what really helped me there is, and I would say to do that with your kids, is to make them street smart, to make them, not to take hardships and dwell on it for ages, like think about the solution, manage to get back on their feet quickly so that, they value things more, they see the bigger picture. I always say that gratitude, like now it's very à la mode or trendy. It's not a new thing for Lebanese. Like when you grow up during a war and then you start having, calm period, you realize that, we always say in Lebanon, "Katter khair Allah," which whatever happens to you, you always say, okay, thank you, God, for whatever I have. So I think this is really important. And it is something, for example, that my husband realized when he moved to Lebanon, and it helped him see things differently. And finally, I would say be genuine and true to yourself. I'm a true believer that what goes around comes around. And I saw it in France that people randomly would help me, and I try to keep that in mind. So if you can help, do it. You were once in someone's shoes, so just be humble and try to help as much as possible.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant decision on your part, Pascale, to go from Lebanon to France, because I've talked to a lot of my friends and former students, and they say the best thing they ever did, or what their parents did, was to send them overseas, to the US or UK or Canada or Australia for their education, because you learn so many new things look at things from a different perspective, things like that. And you're right as regard the resilience. If you grow up in a place like war-torn Lebanon, you become very resilient, right? You become quite tough, and that's something that people say a lot about Lebanese people, that they are very good survivors, so to speak. Now, proceeding with your career, after a short internship at AGF Asset Management in France, as fund management assistant, right? You joined Thomson Reuters as help desk advisor. After 7 months, you were promoted to help desk manager, the very young age of 25. Now, my question here is, what were the traits they saw in you for you to get promoted so quickly?
Yeah. So it's funny when you contacted me for the podcast, it's like, energies were coming back, and ex-colleagues contacted me again, either through a phone call or even like a friend or an ex-colleague came on vacation to Dubai, and I saw her. And I got to ask, I wanted to find the answer from me, but then I thought, what is better than asking the source? So I did get the chance to ask the person who was part of the interview. And the reasons he gave was that, it's my smile, my passion, the energy, but also combined to calmness. That was very important to manage a help desk. You know how everyone who's unhappy would first call the help desk. Another thing he mentioned was that I was always mentioning like the team and what I can be of help to the team, which made me stand up. I was definitely like the challenger, and here I really appreciate the fact that the company and the team took a chance on me, and this is something that I don't forget. I won't forget. And I do like when people do that without making you feel that you owe them anything.
And at one point, Pascale, you wanted to go back to fund management, right? And you wrote and you passed level 1 CFA. That's something in common between us, right? We have a CFA link finally. But when soon after your boss at Thomson Reuters asked you to stay in sales, and you agreed, and soon your CFA journey stopped as well. Now, you told me earlier when we had the discussion that you're glad that you listened to her. Looking back, tell me 3 reasons why staying in sales was, in retrospect, the best decision for you.
Yeah. Okay. So just for the story, I did want to be a portfolio manager. So that's also the second step where you think, okay, I got to figure it out. Portfolio management is going to be what I'm going to do. And I landed a role in AGF. And I was shadowing, by the way, the head of asset allocation, which was a very strong woman that I was even scared of a little bit. And but she was very talented. And the team at that time was very diverse. which is surprising in 18 years ago in this line of work in France. And to go back to like my Thomson Financial days, I was still managing actually the head desk, and I wanted to go into my next step. So the head of region gave me two choices: the product management role of our solution for portfolio management, or a sales role. And I was leaning towards the first one. And she insisted, like she said, no, go into the sales role. And I really thank her for that for multiple reasons. First, the role itself, the product management role, actually didn't happen. So it was actually how fate happens. But it's also like a lot of things that I learned through this in different sales roles, like hybrid, account management, new business, prospecting. All these roles teach you a lot. They thickened my skin, so it makes you even more resilient. So I was resilient from when I lived in Lebanon, but in the business side of resiliency, maybe not. So it did help me in that, and it, you know, it opens a lot of doors to meet a lot of different people, and you know. What I always say also, like, perseverance is the first trait that I see in a salesperson, because you try so many times to get a prospect, and it's only like the 100th times that it does. So when you have this, so it also, you know, showed me how perseverance is important. I could have decided to stay like a young manager and then moving from a management role to another, but I felt that if I do that, I wouldn't bring anything more to the table to a more experienced team. I felt that sales really brought this on the ground learning that I would use in life in general, not only in work. Like I think we all negotiate in everyday life. So
interesting. You know what I mean? People sometimes look down upon sales as something not technical, and they don't want to get their hands dirty. But I think, was it Naval Ravikant or some famous investor or best-selling author said sales is a critical skill that everyone must have, because whether you're in finance or marketing or engineering or wherever, you're always selling something to someone, right? Even if you're selling yourself or your services or your CV. So interesting perspective that, and good for you that you switched to sales, right? Now let's talk about your time as with your bosses, right? Anyone who spent 18 years, as you have done in a career, must have had all sorts of bosses, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm sure you are not an exception. I mean, I know I have had my share of all three. Now, they say you learn even from your bad bosses. So I've got two questions for you regarding the world of bosses. Number one is, what are the three habits you picked up personally from your best bosses that has helped you in your career so far?
Yeah, so definitely I had my share. I have even more than my share, I would say, because of all the restructuring. But luckily, I had many more good bosses than bad bosses. From the good bosses, I learned that, you know, trusting and having your team's back, shielding them from unnecessary like politics or friction is important. Because like when I think about the challenges that I had in my career, it always came from a lack of trust, or like from a manager who wanted to save their skin first, or take credit for the team's work. Other examples were like where managers weren't really fighting for you, and you were left all alone managing internal politics. I did live through a very large merger, and during that time, there was a lot of uncertainties that can stress an employee. I was actually getting married the same year and sitting for my CFA level 2. I was still trying to get it. And, you know, some stress could have been prevented with the proper communication or proper filtering too. So I think it's really important. And I learned that from the good managers of how they do by managing up and down in a very thoughtful manner, I would say. And, you know, like sometimes, luckily I had those managers that trusted me, and I could see how my performance was different in those teams. Like I was giving my best and even more, and no wonder like I was doing well with them, because the way of how they treated me, it gave me that extra boost. Yeah, and even like I can think of a time also that it made me comfortable speaking up in very delicate situations, because I knew that it was a safe space. I did have someone who backs me up, despite like any employee being worried about retaliation risk or anything. So that's one. Second would be like understand what motivates or demotivates your team members. Empathy is really important, and you can't manage everyone in the same way. I learned it shadowing senior managers in my first management experience. And you have to know your team members, and to get to know them, you have to sit with them, ask them questions, know about their lives. I remember I was very scared when I got my role. Like first, I was the youngest, and second, I was the last one arrived, and everyone had more experience. But even one person was really much older than me, and I was thinking, how am I going to add value for him? How am I going to be credible and build trust with this person? And actually, just by talking with this person during that time, they were going through personal challenges, and just being there, listening, supporting him as a manager made me build a good relationship with him. So again, you have to ask those questions. Are your team members motivated by money, work-life balance, recognition, or anything else? Just so you know how to adapt your management style. And all this for the small anecdote, at that time when I was shadowing those managers, at that time Thomson Financial, we were all women managers. So I don't know if empathy is natural because that was happening there, but I would like to think that it's not. It was, it's really important when you see an office in Paris where it wasn't at that time very diverse, being led by women from diverse background. Even our CEO of Thomson Financial was a woman at that time. So, and you see it. I remember I was stuck in 2006 with my husband in the war in Lebanon, and the amount of effort that the team and the managers put through just to try to get us back. They didn't, manage to do it, but it's just until today, it kept a really important message with me, and I really felt valued and taken care of. And third, I would say listen. I think it's harder and harder, but when I look at the best managers that I had were people who listened to me, in one-to-ones, but also let me speak up, let me speak in meetings, if their managers were there and if they wanted to convey an idea that I had, instead of saying it themselves, giving me the opportunity to do it myself, giving me this visibility, asking me about my career aspiration. And even if on the spot they cannot do something about it, they would come 6-9 months down the line and show me that they were actually listening. I always say that when I mentor junior salespeople, they always ask me why I don't speak up when there's awkward silences in the client meetings. And for me, it's the first rule that I've ever learned. And I find this rule really important, even on the phone when I was prospecting, it was something that really worked for me. And I always say, no, pause and let them recollect their thoughts. They're going to give you a lot of valuable information. But if you speak first, you lost them. So I always get offended when I hear, he's a good salesperson because he speaks a lot and knows how to pitch and everything. And this is it. And I think listening is really harder and harder. Our attention span is shorter, and we multitask, we do a lot of things at the same time. So I would say those are the three things that I learned from my best managers.
Right, good ones. Now let's talk about the bad ones, right? What are the 3 habits you decided never to do by watching your worst bosses that later supported your growth as a manager?
Yeah. So I would say like when I also think about the bad managers, I think those were good individual contributors that were given a role as a manager just because people think that this is how a career should go. But some people are just not management materials. So the first one I would say that happened, like example that happened and where it's something that I try, even though as a manager you always come with your ideas and you think it's hard not to suggest things, etc. But it's about judging a new team and without learning first what are their market challenges, what are like the specificities of the region they are in. So to motivate the team, before you give them ideas from 10,000 feet, you have to know what's going on. And I sadly experienced this where I got like messages that weren't very empathetic also, like it was Arab Spring and someone sitting completely out of the region that thought, that this is like normal, what is happening in our region. So and for me, I'm motivated by recognition and acknowledgement of all the efforts I was making. What would have went a long way. It's always easier, like as I say, it's always I also do it sometimes. Like it's always easier to judge from the outside. But when you do that without knowing the region, have never been there here, not knowing the clients, etc., it just doesn't go well with the team. And I remember that this time was really hard in my career, but I got through it thanks to my peers and my colleagues. That their encouragement, they were seeing me how much I was still persevering and trying, etc. And their encouragements were enough for me to get through. But this is something that I always keep in mind. It's like I don't know more than the team, just because my title has manager in it. So yeah, really important.
Right.
And the second for me is not communicating properly, like managing up without honest feedback from the team members. And I have so many of those examples. Like I lived through so many reorg and mergers. It's true, it's hard to find, like I saw it in the pandemic, it's hard to find a balance between over communicating and worrying your team member and not communicating or communicating a little bit less. But what I feel is that not communicating at all, silence is never a good idea. And like I'll give you an example. I was once told that I would get a potential role in the future, and I didn't hear anything about it. So I suppose that like the manager will come back to me when the time is right. And then in a team meeting, the person who actually got that role went up and presented his business plan. So like it was clear that he knew from a long time, and yet I didn't get any communication on it, not before, not after. Things can change, like I wasn't depending on that role, but the minimum you can do is to communicate on it. And this breaks the trust. Like I used to have a good relationship with this manager, but for me it broke the trust, and I couldn't think that they have my best interests in mind in the future. And last, and I think it's the worst, is micromanaging for me. I'm a strong believer when you hire people, you hire them because you should trust them and empower them to do the job. Otherwise, don't hire a team. I do think that like when you hire juniors, it's normal to do some hand holding, help them out, be more like regular catch-ups, etc. But it's temporary, and it's not, and it's to help them. It's not like to watch what they're doing, etc. And when you hire seniors, please, like you have to let them, like, why do you hire them in the first place? If you have to do the job, then either it's a mismatch and you hired wrong, or you are micromanaging and you should stop doing it immediately. So
Yeah, interesting bit about what you learned from not just your great boss, but also from your worst bosses, right? And
yeah.
I can also narrate maybe on later occasion my experience of what I learned from my worst bosses and from my best bosses as well. So yeah, both are learning experiences. One is probably more painful than the other. That's the difference.
Yeah. True.
Right. Pascal, let's talk about the tougher questions now, right? And I want to talk about something which has always bothered me for long, which is about sexism at work. Right? Now, as a woman rising through the ranks, you must have either experienced it or seen it happen to someone else, right? It may be intentional or unintentional, explicit or implicit, but it happens. You're also co-chair of the FactSet Women's Business Resources Group, BRG, in the EMEA region, right? So I've got two questions here for you, given this context that we are talking about. The first is, what are you personally doing as a leader at FactSet to tackle gender-based discrimination and to support women in finance, which, as you and I know, are disproportionately low compared to men in finance?
Yeah. So, like from my young age, I've always been passionate about this. So, again, like to your point, it's the way you're raised. Like if you're raised to see that you're equal to your brothers, why isn't the same everywhere in the world? It's like my idealist hat that takes over. So prior to FactSet, I was already trying to do some stuff. Like I'm married to a Frenchman, as I mentioned, and my kids are born in Lebanon, yet they don't have the nationality and they cannot have it. So it really bothers me, especially when we were living there and people would tell me, but they're French. Why would you want them to have a passport, a Lebanese passport? For me, it means a lot. And I try to raise as much awareness as I can. Unfortunately, I still haven't managed to change the law but I do believe that if we continue, like persistence again, if we continue talking about this, things will change. So this is on the personal side, and even like before FactSet, I was thanks to Thomson Reuters, I was part of Reach, and also like mentoring, women mentoring, etc. Small activities here and there to see how I can help out. And then when I joined FactSet, I tried to make changes. So when I joined FactSet, I had an all-men team. Not that I mind. I actually, grew up with two brothers, so really like working with men. But it was really clear that there was a big imbalance in the Middle East and Africa team. So along with the other managers, we consciously decided that we needed to change that. And from the junior hires, we started to push to get more women profiles. We went and spoke to the universities, because also like the thing is sometimes they don't even apply. So you have to go and do this like branding. And I'm really very proud to say that the team today is perfectly balanced, if not women more than men, even because we recently had a small change. So I consider this everyone's responsibility. You cannot look at your demographics and say, I have more men than women. Okay. No, you really have to do something about it. And as a hiring manager, you can. So this is the first thing. And then, I tried with HR to do more things with FactSet at the time. And then they decided to create business resources group that actually represent not just women, but a lot of other, things we should be raising awareness on. And I decided to apply for the co-chair role, and I went to an interview and I was part of it. So, and like you always ask yourself, what am I going to bring to the table? But just sharing experiences, talking about it like I'm doing today, gets younger women know that they're not alone, that it's not only them that feel that there are microaggressions or that feel that imposter syndrome. we still have a lot to do, but it's we're going in the right track, I would say. And but I do still get a little bit annoyed. I am in the Middle East and Africa region, and when I go in the meeting room or even CFA events, etc., I am still either the only woman in the room or a minority in the room. And even like when I go with the men colleagues, they think automatically that the man is heading the region, which makes me feel, frustrated. And it happens much more often than you think. So we really have still a long way to go.
I mean, let's talk about that last part there, Pascale, because from what I've seen in both my life in corporate as entrepreneur and teaching so many CFA candidates and looking at my LinkedIn connections, a lot of who engage with me privately and via my posts, I feel a lot of women don't even bother going to finance because it looks so formidable, partly because it's male dominated. Or some of them join, but they give up or drop out because they feel life is just too hard trying to power their way through the male dominated hierarchy. So my question to you, the second question I have for you is at an individual level, Pascale, what are 3 practical things women can do to handle sexism at work in whatever shape or form so that they don't get demotivated and hence give up or drop out of a career or a job in finance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a parenthesis before that. I think that, thank you for giving me this opportunity, because the more people like me speak and share their stories, the more people can see that you can actually have a life in a male dominated and a career in a male dominated sector will encourage more women to go for it. So I do think that we all have, and we rely on allies to multiply our voice. So if again, like in the same spirit, I would say to those women not to listen to the voice in their head, questioning why they are here, or will I succeed in a finance career. They need to be more confident. It's only them, as facing those insecurities. No one else is seeing them. Probably everyone else is valuing their work. So be confident, not arrogant, but confident. I would also say not to hesitate to speak up if you feel discriminated. I know I've had a couple of instances, and sometimes it's just unintentional. Which it's even like I always give the example of my 2 boys. Like we went with my husband to to the desert, and I wanted to drive the car in the desert. And my boy's first reaction was, "No, Mom, it's Dad who drives the car." Even though they see that we do everything half. Still, and they're not raised this way, still for them, it's the man who drives the car. So then I told them, you know what? No, it's Mom, and you have to encourage me. And they started encouraging me. But it really is everywhere, because this is how, it is. But we have to raise awareness. And sometimes it's really unintentional, and we need to have more allies and speak about it more. Then I would say in network, I know that how I got some of the opportunities was through the fact that I was building those relationships internally and externally, internationally, remotely, not remotely. So the more people the more they will know about what you can do. And the solid network also gives you a safe space to speak up and to go to someone if you feel that you've been discriminated in any way. So it's really important. And I would finally say and give a shout out to a friend in Lebanon who's decided to do something about it. It's not, you don't need to wait for your company to create a business resource group for it to happen. You can decide to do it outside of informally or formally. So she has decided to create a business resource group in her company and act instead of just complaining in your corner and say it's a very male dominated. Yes, but if you don't do anything about it, it won't change in 20 or 30 or 50 years time.
Yeah, actually, I would like to point out, or rather raise that point you raised about the networking, which I sometimes I keep talking about it like a broken record. Uh, I think women can and should network a lot more than they do now, because networking gives you, like you said, allies, sponsors, mentors, potential employers, um, and that's very important when you're doing something so difficult, and trying to find your voice in such an environment. Now, continuing on the same theme of women in finance, Pascal, something else I recall you mentioning in our earlier call, is the imposter syndrome, right? That seems to affect women far more than men. As you told me, it has happened to you, and it usually manifests itself in people thinking, women thinking that I don't deserve to be here, and or that I can't handle that challenge, things like that. The result is that
Mm.
women often don't seize the opportunities that they could do well at, and they meekly give way to men. So, what are the three actions women can take to deal with this, I would say, destructive imposter syndrome?
Yeah, yeah. I can share how I dealt with it and continue to deal with it.
Mm,
Like first, if there is a role I really want to try, I always tell myself, what is the worst that can happen? Once I realize that the worst thing is not the end of the world, I just go for it, and it gives me the strength and the enthusiasm to do it. So that's first. And honestly, like I always say, it's better to do it than to live with regret. So many times we don't do it and we keep thinking, okay, well,
mm,
what if the second is like when you know about the imposter syndrome. So for me, this is how it was. Like when I learned that this is something that women experience more than men do also, it's just we
mm,
do it more. It helps you overcome it, and you realize that okay, I'm not the only one, and I should do something about it. And I follow Adam Grant on LinkedIn, and I read
mm,
something that he said, and it made me laugh a little bit because it says that it's a paradox. Others believe in you,
mm,
but you don't believe yourself. Yet you believe yourself more than you believe them, which is not logical if you follow the logic. So
mm,
you should believe their judgment more than yours.
mm,
And finally, like I would say, the last advice is that if, let's say, you get a seat at the table by mistake or luck or call it whatever you like I consider that facts that took a chance on me when I got my role 6 years ago. You are there now, so make the best out of it.
mm,
Work on yourself to be up to the challenge. In all cases, to learn, you have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to take this role where you're not ready for it yet, and you're going to learn along the way. I always say that when I compare myself today to 6 years ago, of course I've changed. Of course I've learned from the challenges, from the opportunities, from my mistakes. I learned from colleagues, and we all did go through a pandemic together. We
mm.
all learned. So those are the three things that I would say to follow.
Yeah, I mean, you wear quite a few hats these days, don't you, Pascal? Apart from the personal side of being a mom and managing the family, and apart from being in professional side, a woman leader in finance, you're also a hiring manager. You hire people, which is a very powerful position, and you have hired so many people in your career. Now, what were the best and worst three hires you made, and why were they the best and worst in your opinion?
Yeah. So first, it's great to be able to hire, like just
Mm,
having this opportunity to give someone a chance is always how like, it's a responsibility and a great opportunity. So recently, maybe because I'm over 40 now, I was just looking at a personal assessment of what I like to do and what are my transferable skills, provided I want to do something more creative, for example, or switch careers completely. And I realized that I do love recruiting, building teams, reorganizing teams, finding the right place for someone. Sometimes you have people, you move them around, and they do wonder just because they were mismatched between the role and what they
mm,
can do. So I hired a lot in different roles in different locations, in entry levels, but also, in senior levels. And when I was hiring entry levels, it's kind of like the way it works. They enter and then they will take on other roles. So it's the internal promotion path, let's say. So here it's very important to hire for potential and for culture fit, because what you want is that this person in 18 or 24 months go into, let's say, a sales role or a consultant role or product manager role. So the skills you hire for or the potential you hire for is going to be different, and the personality is going to be different. I would say like the worst hires were the ones where I didn't listen to my intuition, and I wasn't patient enough to find the right candidate. I wanted the candidate tomorrow or yesterday, let's say. And so I didn't give it time. I had my doubts, but I thought, okay, it's okay. Or I hired relying, like I do trust people until they prove me wrong, which I believe is a quality, but sometimes it does put you in an awkward situation. And I did hire based on a recommendation of someone who has been in the company longer than me when I just joined or something like this, which I kind of regret because it's your responsibility at the end of the day. And so, yeah, like on the best hires, though, I think it's the ones where I took a chance on people. Like I mentioned that I really value, different opportunities where the company took a chance on me, like early on in Thomson Financial and Thomson Reuters and FactSet. I believe it really, gives you this extra boost where you say, they took a chance on me, I'm going to show them that they were right. And I ran into someone recently, and it's exactly what he said. He's like, that I hired actually, and his word was like, "Yeah, I can't thank you enough for giving me the role, despite not having any industry experience." And it changed his life, and it meant a lot for me. So the best hires for me are definitely on attitude and not on technical skills. For me, if you have the right attitude, you're motivated, you go the extra mile, you upskill quickly. And I've seen it happen several times. I always give the example that my husband learned Arabic when he was like in his 30s. So, and this is just because he was curious enough and wanted to, really learn the culture. So if he can do it, anyone can learn a skill. But what is important is the soft skill behind it. Is you have to be curious, you have to have the right attitude, you have to be perseverant. All those are soft skills.
Pascal, they call it soft skills, yet it's the hardest to learn. I mean, I know lots of professionals who are technically very well qualified, right, and skilled, but rubbish at dealing with people. And we're talking of people in their 30s and 40s, not youngsters. Now, you must be good at interpersonal relations yourself to have made it this far in corporate. And of course, I can sense that with all the conversations we have had over the past few weeks. Can you inform the listeners on 3 ways, Pascal, by which they can get better at this very hard skill of soft skills?
Yeah. So first, I would say to actively listen. I think we touched on it already when we were talking about the manager, so I won't go into a lot of details, but listening will help you build better relationships with your stakeholders, whoever they are, clients or others. I always say that people buy from people, and for people are likable, but for them to like you, you have to make it about them, not you when you're talking. So, ask those open-ended questions, be genuinely interested in what they're telling you about, or what they're telling you. Always give the example also that 6 months down the line, you meet them again, you mention what they told you, it really goes a long way. Like so many times people say, "Oh, wow, you remember." And this is really important, and this is how listening is really important in any relationship, and in us being in society. That would be for like the first one. The second one, I would say, so practice opening, listening, actively listening, open-ended questions, because it's hard to do it, and harder now with social media and doing so many things at the same time. Another thing that I learned actually from a sales manager who used to report to me and is now in our London office. He used to be the champion of asking for feedback. He always asked for feedback, like from whoever, not only from me, from colleagues, from more junior members of his team. He would go into client meetings, ask for feedback. And, like people were shy in the beginning on sharing the feedback because they never know how people would take it. But the more and more you ask for it, the more you get this kind of feedback. And like sometimes you won't agree with it, but it's important to see how also people perceive you so that you can change things or correct whatever you want to mention. And then the last one I would say is I learned recently, and it's about focusing on your strengths. So a lot of the personality tests or sales management courses, they always tell you those are your strengths, those are your weaknesses, and they focus on your weaknesses. This method, I found it very positive. It tells you, okay, you are very strong in those things, so why don't you amplify those? Still work on your, weaknesses, but amplify those. And I found this really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something I always wanted to ask you was, given your profile at work as well as having a personal life and quite an active personal life, what are the three things, Pascale, that you do or have done that enables you to juggle a busy work life as a senior executive with raising two small kids and managing a family? So what are the hacks?
Yeah, I would just say that I would like these questions to be also asked to men. Like one day will come where it will also be a question for men. And so first, I always say that I don't choose the employer based on compensation or material things. And it's true, like it could have changed the course of my life if I had done that. But the values, like the company that I work for stands for, are really important. And how they manage, how they take care of their employees. I'm not saying I work for free, no, but it's important. And I personally think, even though a lot of women came out of the pandemic they were hit the most. I also think that it also created, like, kind of made it normal for people to have flexible working hours. Like, I know that I didn't use this flexibility, even though my employer used to let me do that, but I was scared of the judgment. But now that I see that everyone is using it, regardless if they're married, unmarried, they have a family, don't have a family, men, women, and so it really gave me more confidence of using it without having this judgment that I felt might happen. Second, I would say that I would lie if I said that my career wouldn't be a standstill when I was building my family. It was on standby, and I was a little bit frustrated because it was timed also with my move to Lebanon, and in Paris, I had my network, my sponsors, so every kind of 2 years I was being promoted. In Lebanon, I stayed in the same role for 7 years. Of course, it changed a little bit. My remit changed, but still, it was still the same role. So I felt frustrated. But what I would say is, like, I got one of my promotion, I got them just after maternity leave. And it was, a manager, a man manager, so not a woman. He was breaking the bias at that time, and a lot do that. So my point is, you're focusing on your family. You feel your career is at standstill still, but keep doing what you're doing, and also let your employer know. Sometimes they assume, and assumptions are really very, risky. I always say, like, you do a lot of things just based on assumptions. They might assume that you want to take it slow because you have your first child or second and they're still young, or you have a family that looks something different for you, like if you're taking care of your parents, or so they just assume. So let them know, because, you know, sometimes they want to give you this opportunity, but they just feel you're not ready. And third, I would say have a support system. For example, we made a conscious choice to move to Lebanon at the time where we decided to have a family, because we felt it's easier for us to have a support system there. Also, my husband was on board, but also, like, I mention him a lot because for him, they are his kids too. You know, it's not like he's just playing with them. He takes care of them as much as I do, if not more. So this also helps me to have the career I have. So, and, you know, I learned through my last certification that everyone has a circle of life, and you don't have to have it all the time, 100% in every element of circle of life, like family, career. Sometimes you have to give way for your family over your career, etc., and it's okay. And the importance is, you know, to maintain balance and for you to be happy and comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, which neatly segues to my next question, because everyone, as they proceed in their career, Pascale, they face questions, right? They face options. They have to surmount problems at work, sometimes linked to their personal life as well. And it's always useful to have a sounding board, like an advisor or a coach or a mentor. So I wanted to ask you, have you ever been coached or mentored in your career, even if informally? And if so, how did you find how did you and your mentor find each other? And what was the experience of the coaching or mentoring?
Yeah, I have been coached and mentored formally and informally, and I can't stress how much it's important. And I was lucky to have that, and I still, you know, look for it at this stage in my career. And I hope that, you know, like, the listeners will think about it and like have it as a call to action to have a mentor or a coach, whether formally or informally. So for the informal ones, it was more like by discussions you have with senior people or even junior people that do something that you would need help on, or that have some vision that is different from yours. And this is how it started, like a conversation that went by and became a little bit more of a mentoring on an informal level. So it's more affinities and, I would say, friendship, but you don't necessarily need to be like friends with your mentor or coach. On the formal side, I've been lucky to be in several companies where they took mentorship, coaching, and sponsorship seriously. And in the last experience I had, I was actually sponsored by a leadership member. And I still have a very good relationship with this person, even though they left the company. But it was really very good. And at that time, I needed my mentor to be a sponsor. I needed, because, you know, a mentor can be different things. Yeah. And at that time, I needed a voice for my region, close to the CEO, close to the company's headquarters, to get, you know, I needed that sponsorship. And I really valued this experience.
I'm going to get a little bit personal now, because in our earlier conversations, in all our earlier conversations, you have always come across as super calm, right? And positive. And this was confirmed by one of your colleagues who said that the one big reason why they hired you, as you related earlier, why they hired you to manage the help desk, despite your lack of experience, was because, you know, you came across as very grounded and calm. So I think it's not only a rare quality, it's an essential that for any leader, right, to be so. So how do you manage to stay calm as a leader, especially in these volatile times?
Yeah. I think it's unfortunate to say, but maybe it's when in every Lebanese that grew during the war, like grew up to the war, you think it's okay, it's not the end of the world. But also, like, through professional experiences, it doesn't mean that I cannot get angry and uncalm, but it takes longer time for me, or like for me to like show this stress. etc. It does look easy maybe to some, but it's not. And but I always try to remember that, I managed to get through something very hard, like remind myself those experiences, those examples where I went through the other side. So I came through the other side, and I think to myself, I can do it again. It's not that complicated. Another thing that happened is like also, it's in the corporate world, you get a lot of corporate trainings, etc. But not many stick. Like some of them just give you it's a good refresher, but they don't stick. One really is one that I did at Thomson Reuters that tells you that you shouldn't focus on the things you cannot control. Like those are things that whatever you do about, you're just going to dwell on them, but you can't change them. It's better to look at the things you can actually control and look for their solution. So this is this is something I try to follow on a daily basis. So it's better to focus your energy on something you can manage, something you can control, and things will be good.
Yeah, more power to you. I wish there were more people like you in corporate, to be honest. And I wish I could absorb some of that calmness from you, because I am not always super calm. Now, I'm going to dig a little bit more personal, Pascale. So I'm quite fitness and nutrition focused. And I noticed with huge delight that you are a certified coach for the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And I think wellness is a highly relevant topic in these pandemic times. And leaders usually ignore this vital element in themselves and in their teams, right? So this is the biggest question, because I've got 4 sub questions for you, right, on this topic. So important. First question is, there's usually a trigger that makes people change their lifestyle. What made you focus on wellness and take up this course?
Yeah, so I was approaching 40. It was my 39th birthday, and I was approaching 40, and things got better at work, and I decided I want to go on a health journey, and I even posted it on my social media account. I thought, when you do it, when you say it in front of people, you become more accountable for it, but also they encourage you. There was so much encouragement coming. It's funny that I'm talking about this here, because it's a subject that I 20 years ago, you'd asked me to talk about it, I wouldn't have said yes, because I struggled a lot in my teenage years with weight. I would lose and go back up and gain even more, because I was always doing like this, I have a strong will, I would follow it to the letter for a short period of time, fat diet, and then gain it all back again, because I wasn't really changing anything in my mindset. So I decided that day that before I turned 40, I want to be healthy. And for me, this was the first time that healthier did not mean skinny, or did not mean being at my ideal weight or fitting in my 18 years or 20 years genes. It was really be healthy, be in shape, be confident in my clothes, be able to breathe, go up the stairs without losing breath, play with my boys, being in front of the camera lens. I know that we had a lot of back and forth on the pictures. I love taking pictures, but me in the pictures a little bit less. So, and I had also some health issues with hormones, lymph, even wanted a third child. So I decided really I want to go on a health, journey. And I lost 12 kilos on my own, so in 1 year. So it took a long time, but it was really through changes, something long term. Then I went on holidays, and I started losing this will to make changes. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go back again to get help and pay money again to a health coach and do a more stricter diet. It worked, but then the pandemic started, and the stress of it, missing my family. We also bought a house in the middle of the pandemic, and we started doing renovations, pressure at work, and homeschooling when both of us, have a busy career. So yes, I am an emotional eater. I did try to exercise with my kids and family, but eventually I got the weight back. But what I realized is that the weight that I got back quickly was the one that I got through diet, and the other one took a long time because I had like a really healthy relationship with food while losing those. So again, also like during the pandemic, I think a lot of people ask themselves what they can study, etc. So I always loved studying. I thought, okay, let me do something AI or digital transformation related to my career. But then I thought, okay, you know what, I'm going to use the money that I was paying the health coach and actually get certified myself as a health coach, because who's best, positions to know more about myself than me. And I wanted to understand why, what is the trigger that makes me eat and binge eat. And I really learned a lot. I really liked it because they show you a lot of different opposed methods, I would say, and it's up to you to see what works for you. So it's all about bio-individuality and things like this. And I'm not where I was in 2019, but I am working towards it and putting in place things that work long term. So exercise more. I realize what is triggering my binge eating. I try to cook. So I think it's a daily struggle, but I'm on the right track.
Yeah, going back to the point which you made, the answer to the previous question about doing things about it. So what are the 3 key steps that you're taking regularly as part of your transition to better health?
Yeah. So first, I would say exercise. Like if you would ask my family or anyone who knows me if I would ever exercise regularly, it wasn't, I like watching sports, but not exercising. But today I do exercise and regularly, like even if it's 10, 15 minutes, I still do it. And it really helps me mentally. Like I know we talk a lot about mental health. This is something that really, changed my mood.
Yeah.
Cooking more, like I love cooking. I love experimenting with the cooking and mixing things that you don't think of mixing. But I don't know, I just felt out of it and like I didn't have the will to cook anymore. But now I make it a point to cook again, and at least I know what is going in the food for me and my family. I also started acupuncture, which is something like, again, putting needles in my body would have not been something I would think about earlier on. Yet I started it and it's really great and helping me a lot.
Yeah, and my third question was actually related to this same process of change, right? Because it's usually so tough, Pascale, to develop new habits and drop old ones, right? I mean, so at a personal level, I'm very curious, what were your 3 biggest problems when moving to a healthier lifestyle, and how did you solve this?
So it's exactly that. Like I think what used to happen is let's say I would do something good and then I would go into doing something that is not exactly what I should be doing for healthy eating, and then I would say, okay, I'll drop the ball and stop it, because it's very hard to change habits.
Correct.
So what I used to do is like sometimes I would eat things when I'm binge eating. I eat things that I didn't even like. But today what I try to do is limit the temptations at home, and be mindful of what is causing me to eat more. And I try to do something else to put my mind out of it. So, for example, I love dancing, I love music, I put on my favorite music, and that's if I can. I don't journal. I know something some people do, and it's something that is recommended. But for me, I had a bad experience, so it doesn't work for me. But this is key. It's important to understand what works for you. It doesn't mean that if it works for someone else, it will work for you. So that's one. Second was to motivate myself to exercise. I have, like, I don't know, I would go and subscribe to gyms here and there, the best, the closest, with a friend, etc. But I would barely go. So, and I found that what works for me is working, exercising at home. I have a friend who created like a dance class that is all based on feeling the music and enjoying it, and it works for me. Or I do like small short videos. So I'm here, I'm saying to myself, I came, I tried, and it starts with 7 minutes, then you end up doing 40 minutes. The other day I ran, which is something that I would have never done. And it's important to tell yourself, I was so happy, like I ran. So it's important also to encourage yourself and tap yourself on the back. The hardest is eating less fats and sugars. And I try to do like the same recipe in the oven, and try to cut down on wine, which is an achievement on its own when you're married to a Frenchman.
Yeah, I mean, it can be quite tempting when you have all this very delicious fattening and sugary foods cheaply and easily available around you all the time. And of course, my last question on this very important topic is the power of results to motivate you, right? So it's nice to see regular results coming in. So my question was, what are the significant positive results that you are seeing in yourself, both at work and at home, as a result of the above transition to well-being? Do you advocate better health at work as an incidental question?
Yeah, so I have so much more energy, and I felt more confident, like on the weight of 2019-20, but I will get back there, so I'm not worried. I do advocate for better health at work. I'm really proud to say that, when the pandemic started, the first wellness initiatives taken by FactSet globally came from team members from the FactSet team, because we knew that someone in the team did yoga, someone did meditation. So we asked them to do during our check-ins, run it for the team, and then they run it for the entire company. So I do that, and I do encourage that. But I also want to raise awareness, and this is one of the reasons that I said that maybe I wouldn't have talked about it 20 years ago, but today I am talking about it, because it's important also to raise awareness on the discrimination one might get when they are overweight in the work environment. I think we tend to not think about it, because people think in their mind that like race or gender, this bias is different, because weight, people can actually do something about it. It's my responsibility and everyone's responsibility, but yet there is a bias. And I remember that when things got tough at work, I was binge eating and emotional eating, so I arrived at the highest weight I've ever seen. And I cannot say that everyone was very inclusive in the workplace. So just like it doesn't get to me as much. But when I was a teenager and until my 30s, I had a very hard time with my body image. I didn't wear short sleeves. I was wearing like my brother's clothes and very loose, which made me look even more overweight. And I hope that this, sharing this shows that, we talk a lot about bullying at school, but it does continue, I would say, in the workplace, maybe not in the same way, but we have to be inclusive in every sense of it, not just pick and choose what inclusivity is important for us.
Well, we have been talking for quite long now. Time flies. Hey, when you're having fun. I always wrap up my interviews with experienced professionals like yourself by asking them to give advice to youngsters, so valuable. So what 3 pieces of advice, Pascale, would you give anyone in his or her early 20s who is today either entering the workforce or in earlier career stage?
Yeah. I would say it's quite challenging to enter the workforce today. I remember when I joined, we had like a 5 weeks training sessions all together. So it helps you meet senior managers, meet other team members. So it's all happening virtually, or at least in a hybrid mode today. I would still say not to have this as like an obstacle to create your network. So create it virtually anyway, find those opportunities to connect with seniors, with peers, with colleagues, even if your company is not trying to do it, because I do think that companies also are realizing how do we onboard those young people who are joining our company. But even if your company is not doing the extra effort, do it yourself. Network is really important. Ask questions, shadow, just have a 15 minutes chat on Teams or Zoom with anyone, and they will appreciate it. And it will help you, get to know the company better, get to know people better. And it will be very important as you grow into your career into the company. So that's one. Second, I would say, and this is something that I always say when I was managing the help desk. I know that a lot of people was telling me, even when I started at the help desk, but you majored in finance. Why are you starting at the help desk? I always say that it's not the role that defines you. You define the role you're in, and please don't stick to the job description. I don't like the attitude where this is my job description and that's exactly what I do. I think you learn a lot. Of course, sometimes, you don't want to step on other people's shoes, but you learn a lot from being curious to do more than what your role entitles. And also you become, down the line, and you become the obvious option for moving into the next role in your career path. And then I would say keep an open mind. Sometimes your next step is not exactly what you've imagined. But if you stay curious, and then a couple of years down the line, you realize that this experience was actually really good for me. You always read that a career is not a linear path, and that's very true. Because I remember when I moved from a management role to a sales role, individual contributor role, people told me, but why? And for me, I would have continued as a manager, but then at a certain time, I was doing well as a manager, but as I go along, I would have maybe not done as well. So it's not a problem to kind of take a step back for people in people's mind. Taking a step back, for me, it wasn't a step back. And this is where I want to say to people, you define your success, and what matters is what makes you happy and proud at the end of the day.
Well, that brings us to the end of this very interesting episode, Pascale. I must thank you for many things, starting with your patience. I think we've gone through 4 versions of the script of making changes back and forth. But we've got a very concise, comprehensive message that anyone pursuing a career would find it invaluable to listen to. Thank you for your patience to start with. Thank you for your honesty, because I think, especially regarding upbringing and dealing with bad bosses, dealing with imposter syndrome and sexism and wellness, weight loss and gain issues. Thank you for the very brave honesty that you've demonstrated, which I think a lot of young women can take heart from and be inspired by. Thank you for the insights. I think when you're honest and when you're patient, and all these insights come together in a very neat package, which I hope this podcast will be seen as by people listening to it. So thank you for all that, and hopefully one day we'll meet face to face when I'm back in Dubai.
Hopefully, and I wanted to thank you also from my side. This was really very interesting also for me. I think you put your guests at ease so that they can be their authentic self and share their experiences. And this means a lot because, as I said, I've done it before, and it's always hard, like to kind of reveal yourself. But through the back and forth, you give more and more. You trust more your host and give more insight. And I do hope that everyone who watches this finds it useful.
Thank you so much again, Pascale.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you found it insightful and inspirational. If you did enjoy this episode, please drop us a review and spread the word. And be sure to check out more exclusive content on therealfinancementor.com and my LinkedIn profile, which is Binod Shankar CFA. Let's keep in touch. Just add your name to the mailing list on therealfinancementor.com and we'll tell you about new episodes, plus book reviews, upcoming events and blogs. Till the next time, onwards and upwards.